The German Shepherd stood perfectly balanced on his hind legs at the busy intersection of Maple and Fifth, his dark eyes scanning each passing vehicle with military precision. Commuters slowed, phones raised to capture the strange sight, but Ranger remained focused, undistracted. For 6 months, he had maintained his vigil, searching for a face he would never see again. Through rain and scorching heat, the dog appeared like clockwork, examining police cruisers with particular intensity, his tags long gone, but the disciplined posture revealing his training. Some tried approaching him. None succeeded. Until today. 7-year-old Lily Thompson pressed her small palm against the car window, her green eyes widening as she spotted him. Something in his determined stance, in the loneliness of his search, called to her. For the first time since the accident, her lips parted. "Dog?" she whispered, breaking her silence. "He's looking for someone." Her mother glanced in the rearview mirror, startled by the sound of her daughter's voice. Neither could possibly know how this moment would alter their lives forever. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Lily Thompson had not spoken a full sentence in 347 days. Not since the military chaplain had appeared at their door with news that would shatter their family. Sarah Thompson had watched her vibrant daughter retreat into silence, a selective mutism that specialists attributed to traumatic grief. The little girl with copper curls and a constellation of freckles who once narrated elaborate stories now communicated through nods, shakes, and the occasional written note. Sarah gripped the steering wheel, glancing again at her daughter in the rearview mirror. As an emergency room nurse at County General, she recognized the significance of this moment. Lily had spoken. 2 words, but they were the first that had escaped her lips since the funeral. The significance wasn't lost on Sarah, whose auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, dark circles beneath her eyes testifying to double shifts and sleepless nights. "You saw the dog, honey?" Sarah asked carefully, not wanting to overwhelm her daughter with her obvious excitement. Lily nodded, her small fingers still pressed against the window as they waited at the red light. The German Shepherd remained poised on his hind legs, scanning each vehicle with an almost human intentness. At home, Ethan Thompson would be waiting for them, likely with his homework spread across the kitchen table. At 12, he had assumed responsibilities beyond his years, stepping into a protective role over his younger sister that sometimes made Sarah's heart ache. His sandy blonde hair and serious eyes mirrored his father's, a daily reminder of Michael Thompson, the Army K-9 handler who had died in Afghanistan 13 months ago. Michael's presence remained in the house, his boots still by the door, his favorite mug on the shelf, his dog-eared books on military working dogs that Ethan had begun to study with increasing interest. Sarah couldn't bring herself to pack these items away, not when they were the tangible remains of a man who had loved them fiercely. The German Shepherd at the intersection seemed to represent something significant to Lily, and Sarah wasn't about to dismiss anything that had broken through her daughter's silence. After their appointment with Dr. Eleanor Wright, the child psychologist, who had been working patiently with Lily, perhaps they would drive by again. Perhaps this mysterious dog was exactly what they needed. A distraction, a focus, something new in their landscape of grief. The therapy session with Dr. Wright proceeded as usual, with Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor, communicating through drawings and nods. Sarah watched through the observation window, noting how her daughter sketched a dog standing on its hind legs, over and over. Dr. Wright. A woman with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses seemed intrigued by this new development. "She drew something different today," Dr. Wright said afterward, handing Sarah the collection of drawings. "And I understand she spoke in the car." "2 words," Sarah confirmed, her voice hushed with cautious hope. "About a dog we saw at the intersection of Maple and 5th. He was standing on his hind legs, looking into cars." Dr. Wright's expression turned thoughtful. "Animals can sometimes reach children when humans can't." This seemed significant for Lily. Rain had begun to fall by the time they left the clinic, a steady April shower that darkened the pavement and sent pedestrians scurrying for cover. Sarah had intended to take Lily directly home, but as they approached the intersection, her daughter pressed her face against the window, searching. "Do you want to see if the dog is still there?" Sarah asked. Lily nodded emphatically. Despite the weather, the German Shepherd remained at his post, now soaking wet but still vigilant. His fur was plastered to his powerful frame, water dripping from his muzzle as he continued his search, rising onto his hind legs each time a police cruiser passed. "He's still looking," Lily whispered, her voice so soft Sarah almost missed it over the patter of rain on the roof. Sarah pulled into the small shopping center parking lot adjacent to the intersection. "Let's wait for the rain to ease up a bit," she suggested. But Lily was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her gaze fixed on the dog. "Lily, wait!" Sarah called. But her daughter had already cracked open the door. With a sigh, Sarah grabbed her umbrella and hurried after her. The German Shepherd noticed them approaching and dropped to all fours, his posture alert but not aggressive. Up close, Sarah could see he was thin beneath his wet coat, though not emaciated. His eyes were intelligent, assessing them with a clarity that seemed almost human. "Be careful, honey," Sarah cautioned, staying close as Lily approached the dog. "He might be scared or dangerous." But the German Shepherd showed no signs of aggression. Instead, he sat perfectly still as Lily extended her small hand, palm up, in a gesture that surprised Sarah with its confidence. "Where did you learn to do that?" Sarah asked. Lily didn't answer, her focus entirely on the dog. The German Shepherd sniffed her hand carefully, then lowered his head slightly, allowing Lily to touch the wet fur between his ears. "He's looking for his person," Lily said, forming her 3rd sentence in nearly a year. "He keeps looking in all the cars." A police cruiser drove by, and as if to demonstrate Lily's point, the dog immediately stood on his hind legs again, eyes tracking the vehicle until it disappeared around a corner. When it was gone, he dropped back down, a soft whine escaping his throat. "He thinks his person is in a police car," Lily explained, with a clarity that stunned her mother. "Lily?" Sarah began, not knowing how to respond to this sudden verbalization. A car horn blared nearby, and the dog flinched, but didn't run. Sarah noticed a patch of fur on his shoulder that seemed different, a small area where the hair pattern changed, possibly from an old injury or a healed wound. The rain intensified, and Sarah opened her umbrella, holding it over Lily and, by extension, the dog, who seemed to appreciate the respite. "We should go home now," Sarah said gently. "It's getting worse out here." Lily looked up at her, green eyes wide and pleading. "We can't leave him. He's all alone." The words struck Sarah like a physical blow. How many nights had she lain awake, feeling exactly that way, all alone, even with her children sleeping down the hall? "He probably belongs to someone. Honey," Sarah tried. But even as she said it, she noted the absence of a collar, the lean frame that spoke of missed meals, the watchful vigilance of an animal that had been on its own for some time. "He doesn't," Lily insisted. "Not any more." She turned back to the dog. "Do you want to come with us? Just for tonight?" To Sarah's amazement, the German shepherd tilted his head, as if considering the offer. "Lily, we can't just take a stray dog home," Sarah began, then faltered. The dog wasn't acting like a stray. He was behaving like a trained animal, disciplined and intelligent. "Let me make a quick call to the shelter. At least—" Sarah stepped a few feet away, phone in hand, but the local animal shelter was already closed for the evening. The automated message advised leaving strays where they were unless they posed an immediate danger. Looking back at her daughter, Sarah felt a conflicting tangle of emotions. Lily was speaking, engaging with the world again because of this dog. Turning away now felt impossible. "Just for tonight," Sarah conceded, not entirely sure she was making the right decision. "We'll check for a microchip tomorrow. Put up some found notices." Lily's face brightened with the first real smile Sarah had seen in months. "He can sleep in my room." The German shepherd followed them to the car without hesitation, as if he understood every word. When Sarah opened the back door, he jumped in smoothly and sat beside Lily, his posture perfect even on the car seat. As Sarah drove home, she watched in the rear-view mirror as Lily tentatively placed her small hand on the dog's damp fur. The German shepherd leaned slightly against her, a gesture of such gentle companionship that Sarah felt her throat tighten. "What should we call him?" she asked, trying to sound casual about this temporary arrangement. Lily studied the dog for a long moment. "Ranger," she said finally. "His name is Ranger." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "How do you know that, honey?" Lily shrugged, a ghost of her old self showing through. "It's what he looks like. A ranger." As they turned onto their street, Sarah wondered what Ethan would say about their unexpected guest. She wondered what she would feed a dog this size, where he would sleep despite Lily's assertion, what this would mean for their carefully balanced household budget. But most of all, she wondered about the strange coincidence that had brought this particular dog into their lives on this particular day, and why he seemed to be searching so diligently for someone in a police car. Ethan Thompson was at the kitchen table when they arrived home, math textbook open beside a half-eaten sandwich. His expression cycled rapidly from surprise to confusion to wariness as Ranger padded into the house behind Lily. "Mom," he questioned, rising from his chair, "what's with the dog?" Sarah set her keys in the ceramic dish by the door, buying herself a moment to formulate an explanation that wouldn't sound completely impulsive. "We found him at the intersection. He's just staying the night until we can check if someone's looking for him tomorrow." Ranger surveyed the modest living room with alert interest, his wet coat leaving small puddles on the hardwood floor. "I'll get some towels," Sarah said, heading toward the linen closet. Lily knelt beside Ranger, her small hands already working to dry his fur with the hem of her jacket. "He's soaking wet," Ethan observed, approaching cautiously. "And huge. Is he friendly?" As if in answer, Ranger sat perfectly still as Ethan extended his hand, mimicking his sister's earlier gesture. The dog sniffed the boy's fingers, then gave them a gentle lick. "I think that's a yes," Sarah said, returning with a stack of old towels. She handed one to each child and kept the third for herself. Together, they worked to dry the German shepherd, who submitted to their ministrations with dignified patience. As Sarah rubbed the towel along Ranger's side, her hand brushed against something hard beneath his fur. Parting the thick coat, she discovered a metal tag attached to what looked like a tactical collar, almost completely hidden. "Ethan, can you get the desk lamp?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Ethan brought the lamp closer, and under its direct light, Sarah could make out the insignia of the Riverdale Police Department on the metal tag, along with an identification number K97734. "He's a police dog," she breathed, sitting back on her heels. "A police dog," Ethan repeated, his eyes widening. "Like the ones Dad worked with." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "We need to call the police department. They must be looking for him." Lily's face fell, her hand tightening in Ranger's fur. "No," she protested. "He's lost. He's looking for someone who isn't there anymore." The certainty in her daughter's voice gave Sarah pause. "What do you mean, honey?" "He stands up to look in police cars," Lily explained. "But the person he's looking for isn't in any of them. Not anymore." Sarah exchanged a glance with Ethan, who seemed equally struck by his sister's analysis and the fact that she was speaking at all. "Let me make a call," Sarah said gently. "If he is a police dog, someone needs to know where he is." While the children continued to dry, Ranger and Ethan rummaged in the refrigerator for something the dog might eat. Sarah stepped into the hallway with her phone. A quick call to the Riverdale Police Department connected her to the night desk sergeant. "Ma'am, you say you found K97734. The sergeant's voice sharpened with interest. "That's Ranger. He belonged to Officer James Miller." "Belonged," Sarah repeated, a chill running through her. There was a pause on the line. "Officer Miller passed away 6 months ago. Cancer. It was pretty sudden. Ranger was supposed to go to Miller's sister, but he escaped from her yard about a week after the funeral. We've had reports of sightings, but no one's been able to get close to him." "He's been on his own for 6 months?" Sarah asked, her heart sinking as she glanced back at the dog who sat so calmly with her children. "Looks that way. Animal Control's been trying to pick him up. He's been standing at that intersection checking cars for months now. Miller used to pick him up there after his shift." The sergeant's voice softened. "That dog's been looking for his handler all this time." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. "My daughter somehow knew. She said he was looking for someone who wasn't there anymore." "Smart kid," the sergeant remarked. "Listen, I should tell you. There was an incident after Miller died. Ranger tried to protect Miller's body at the hospital. Got aggressive with the medical staff. He's been classified as potentially dangerous since then." "You've got kids?" "You said yes," Sarah acknowledged, watching as Lily fed Ranger small pieces of turkey from Ethan's sandwich. The dog was taking the offerings with exquisite gentleness from her fingers. but he seems perfectly calm with them. Well, you need to report finding him to animal control within 48 hours. The sergeant informed her. It's regulation for found dogs, especially ones with his classification. The department will want him back anyway. There's been talk about giving him a ceremonial retirement. And then what happens to him? Sarah asked. The sergeant's pause spoke volumes. That'll be up to the chief and animal control. Given his history and training, adoption might be complicated. After hanging up, Sarah returned to the kitchen, the weight of this new information heavy on her shoulders. The scene before her was unexpectedly domestic Ranger lying on the floor beside Lily, who was reading aloud from one of her picture books, the first time she'd done so in nearly a year. Ethan sat nearby, scrolling through something on his tablet. "Mom," he said, looking up as she entered. "I've been researching. Ranger here is kind of famous. Look." He turned the tablet toward her. On the screen was a newspaper article with a photograph of Ranger wearing a ceremonial vest covered in medals, standing beside a smiling officer in dress uniform. "K9 Officer Ranger receives Valor Award for saving Handler," the headline read. The article detailed how Ranger had dragged an injured Officer Miller from a burning vehicle following a pursuit crash 3 years earlier. "He's a hero," Ethan said, his voice tinged with awe. "He saved his handler's life. And now he's been searching for him," Sarah murmured, the poignancy of the situation striking her anew. "Can we keep him?" Lily asked suddenly, looking up from her book. The question, her longest sentence yet, hung in the air between them. Sarah sat down at the table, choosing her words carefully. "Ranger belongs to the police department, honey, and they've been looking for him. I need to let animal control know we found him tomorrow." Lily's face crumpled. "But he picked us. He came with us." "I know." "But," Sarah began. "Dad would have wanted us to help him," Ethan interjected. "You know he would have." The mention of Michael hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her husband had worked with military dogs, had spoken often of their loyalty and intelligence. What would he have done in this situation? "Let me think about it," she said finally. "For now, Ranger can stay the night. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." As if understanding the reprieve, Ranger rested his head on his paws, his dark eyes following Sarah's movements with an intelligence that was almost unnerving. That night, despite Sarah's plan to have Ranger sleep in the laundry room, the German Shepherd found his way to Lily's bedroom when Sarah went to check on her daughter before turning in. She found Lily fast asleep with one hand resting on Ranger's back, the dog alert and watchful at the foot of her bed. For the first time in months, Lily's face was peaceful in sleep, without the tension that had become so familiar. Sarah couldn't bring herself to separate them. "Just for tonight," she whispered to Ranger, who acknowledged her with a slight tilt of his head, a gesture so human it gave her goosebumps. But as she returned to her own empty bed, Sarah wondered if she was making a terrible mistake, allowing her children to bond with a dog they would almost certainly have to give up. Morning arrived with the soft patter of rain against the windows and the unfamiliar sound of nails clicking on hardwood. Sarah blinked awake, momentarily disoriented before remembering their four-legged guest. The digital clock read 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her alarm was set to go off. With a sigh, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and reached for her robe. In the hallway, she found Ranger sitting at attention outside Lily's closed door. He turned to acknowledge her with a slight tilt of his head, but made no move to leave his post. "Good morning," Sarah whispered, reaching down to touch his head. "Are you standing guard?" Ranger's tail swept once across the floor in response. Sarah gently opened Lily's door to check on her. Her daughter was still asleep, copper curls splayed across her pillow. One arm stretched toward the space where Ranger had apparently spent most of the night. The sight stirred something in Sarah's chest. It had been so long since Lily had slept peacefully. Downstairs, Sarah started the coffee maker and opened the back door to let Ranger into the fenced yard. The German shepherd took care of his business with military efficiency, then returned to sit expectantly at her feet. His disciplined behavior was a stark reminder of his training. "I don't have any dog food," she told him, opening the refrigerator. "But I think we can manage eggs and some leftover chicken until we figure things out." As she prepared breakfast, Sarah mentally reviewed her work schedule. She was due at the hospital for a 12-hour shift, starting at noon. Mrs. Abernathy from next door usually checked in on the kids after school. But would she be comfortable with Ranger in the house? And what about animal control? The sergeant had said she needed to report finding Ranger within 48 hours. The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted her thoughts. To her surprise, it was Lily, already dressed for school in jeans and a purple sweater. "You're up early?" Sarah observed, trying to keep her tone casual. Normally, getting Lily out of bed and ready for school involved multiple reminders and gentle coaxing. "Ranger needed breakfast," Lily stated simply, coming to stand beside her mother at the counter. "Can I help?" Sarah handed her daughter a bowl. "You can scramble these eggs for him." As Lily carefully broke eggs into the bowl, Sarah studied her profile. There was something different about her this morning. A focus, a presence that had been missing for months. "Did you sleep well?" Sarah asked. Lily nodded. "Ranger keeps the bad dreams away." The simple statement caught Sarah off guard. Lily hadn't mentioned nightmares before, though the child psychologist had suggested they might be contributing to her selective mutism. "You've been having bad dreams." Lily concentrated on whisking the eggs. "About Daddy. About him not coming home." Sarah's heart clenched. She set down the knife she'd been using to slice leftover chicken and placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I didn't know, honey. You never said." "I couldn't," Lily replied, but with the straightforward logic of a 7-year-old. "But Ranger understands, without me saying." Before Sarah could respond, Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, tablet in hand. "Mom, I've been doing more research on Ranger," he announced, coming to join them at the counter. "He's not just any police dog. He's from a special breeding program. His training cost over $30,000. Sarah raised her eyebrows. "That's quite an investment. He can detect like a dozen different explosives, track people for miles, and take down armed suspects." Ethan continued, his voice rising with excitement. "He's basically a canine superhero." "Who?" "A superhero who needs breakfast," Sarah reminded him, nodding toward the silverware drawer. "Set the table, please." As the family settled into an unexpectedly normal morning routine, Ethan setting places, Lily feeding Ranger, Sarah preparing human breakfast, the reality of their situation hovered at the edges of Sarah's consciousness. This domesticity was temporary. Ranger wasn't theirs to keep. Over breakfast, Sarah broached the subject carefully. "I need to call animal control today about Ranger." Two pairs of eyes, one green, one blue, fixed on her with identical expressions of dismay. "But he's happy here," Lily protested, her small hand finding its way to Ranger's fur. "He belongs with us," Ethan added. "Look how good he is with Lily. She's talking again because of him." Sarah took a deep breath. "I understand how you both feel, but Ranger is technically police property. Very expensive police property," she added with a glance at Ethan. "And there are regulations about found dogs, especially ones with his level of training." "What will happen to him?" Lily asked, her voice small. Sarah wished she had a reassuring answer. "The police department wants to give him a ceremonial retirement. After that, I'm not sure." "They'll put him in a shelter," Ethan said flatly. "And no one will adopt him because of that dangerous classification." "We don't know that," Sarah countered, though the sergeant's hesitation the night before suggested Ethan might be right. "He's not dangerous," Lily insisted, her arm now wrapped around Ranger's neck. The German shepherd sat patiently, his dark eyes moving between the humans as if following the conversation. "I know he seems gentle with us," Sarah acknowledged. "But the police told me there was an incident at the hospital after his handler died. He apparently got aggressive with the medical staff." Ethan's expression turned thoughtful. "What if he was just trying to protect Officer Miller? Dad always said military dogs sometimes try to guard their handlers if they're injured." The observation struck Sarah with unexpected force. As an ER nurse, she had seen family members react with anger and aggression when faced with the death of a loved one. Was Ranger's behavior so different? A glance at the clock broke the moment. "We need to get moving or you'll be late for school," she said, standing to clear the plates. "Can Ranger come with us to drop off?" Lily asked, her green eyes pleading. Sarah hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea. Honey, he should stay here while I make some calls." To her surprise, Lily didn't argue, though her expression fell. Instead, she knelt beside Ranger and wrapped her arms around his neck. "We'll be back after school," she whispered into his fur. "Promise you'll stay here." Ranger responded by gently licking her cheek once, a gesture so tender it made Sarah's throat tighten. After the children left for school, Ethan with instructions to keep an eye on his sister, and Lily with a backward glance at Ranger. Sarah sat at the kitchen table with her phone and a cup of coffee. The German shepherd lay at her feet, apparently content to stay close. Her first call was to the local animal control office. Officer Diane Russell answered, her voice brisk and official. "You found the missing canine. I'll be there within the hour to pick him up." "Actually," Sarah interjected, "I was hoping to discuss the situation first. My children have become quite attached to him." There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Thompson, that dog is classified as potentially dangerous. He's also valuable police property. This isn't a case of finders keepers." Sarah felt a flush of irritation at the woman's condescending tone. "I understand that. I'm just trying to get a clear picture of what will happen to him. Standard procedure is to return him to the police department. They'll decide his fate from there." Officer Russell's voice softened slightly. "Look, I know these dogs can be charming, but they're not pets. They're trained for police work, and when they can't do that anymore, they often struggle to adjust to civilian life." After hanging up, Sarah's next call was to Dr. Wright. hoping to get the child psychologist's perspective on Lily's dramatic improvement. "It's quite remarkable." Dr. Wright agreed when Sarah described the changes, but not entirely surprising. There are numerous cases of children with selective mutism responding to animal therapy. The unconditional acceptance an animal offers can create a safe space for verbal expression. "But we can't keep him," Sarah explained, outlining the complications with Ranger's status. Dr. Wright mused. "Would you be open to bringing Lily in for an emergency session this morning? I'd like to observe her interaction with Ranger. It might help me write a professional recommendation, if that would be useful." Sarah glanced at the clock. She had just enough time before her shift. "We'll be there in 30 minutes. As she gathered her things, Sarah noticed Ranger standing at the living room window, up on his hind legs, watching a police cruiser pass by on the street. The sight confirmed what Lily had intuited. He was still searching for his handler, still hoping for a reunion that could never happen. The parallels to her own family's grief didn't escape her. At Dr. Wright's office, Ranger's training was evident in his calm, attentive behavior. He followed basic commands from Lily with an eagerness that suggested he welcomed the structure. When Dr. Wright asked Lily to tell her about Ranger, the floodgates opened. Lily spoke more in that 30-minute session than she had in the past 6 months combined. "He's brave and smart, and he saved his police officer," Lily explained, her hand resting on Ranger's head. "But now he's sad because his person is gone. Like my daddy is gone." Dr. Wright nodded encouragingly. "And how does that make you feel?" "Like we understand each other," Lily said simply. "Like we can help each other, not be sad." After the session, Dr. Wright pulled Sarah aside. "This connection is significant. Sarah, I'd be happy to provide a letter recommending Ranger as an emotional support animal for Lily. It might help with your case if you decide to pursue keeping him. Do you think that's possible?" Dr. Wright smiled. "In my experience, where there's a will, there's often a way, especially when it comes to helping children heal with new hope." Sarah dropped Ranger at home and headed to her shift at the hospital, leaving a note for Mrs. Abernathy about their four-legged house guest. Throughout her busy day in the ER, Sarah's mind kept returning to Ranger and what he represented for her family. Not just a pet, but a potential bridge back to normalcy for Lily. During her lunch break, she called the police department and asked to speak with someone about Ranger's situation. To her surprise, she was connected directly to Chief Thomas Bennett. "Mrs. Thompson," he greeted her, his deep voice carrying the weight of authority. "I understand you've found our missing K-9 officer." Sarah explained the situation. Lily's selective mutism, her dramatic improvement since meeting Ranger, and Dr. Wright's recommendation. "I sympathize with your situation," Chief Bennett said when she finished. "But there are protocols for retiring police dogs. Typically, they're offered first to their handlers or handler's family, then to other officers. But Officer Miller's sister couldn't handle him," Sarah pointed out. "That's why he's been on his own for 6 months." "True," the chief acknowledged. "And that complicates matters. There's also the issue of his behavior at the hospital. We can't in good conscience place a potentially dangerous animal with a family, especially one with young children." "With all due respect," Sarah countered, "my husband was a military K-9 handler. I understand these dogs. And Ranger has been nothing but gentle with my children." There was a pause on the line. Your husband was a handler. Michael Thompson, Army. Sarah confirmed. He served 2 tours with the 37th Military Police Detachment's K-9 unit before we had children. I see. Chief Bennett's tone had shifted slightly. Tell you what, Mrs. Thompson, let me look into this situation more thoroughly. In the meantime, Officer Russell has agreed to postpone picking up Ranger until tomorrow, given the circumstances. I'll be in touch. The reprieve, though temporary, lifted a weight from Sarah's shoulders. As she finished her shift and headed home, she wondered if she was fighting a losing battle. Even if they were allowed to keep Ranger, could they afford it? Pet food? Veterinary care? Training? It all added up, and their budget was already stretched thin, with Michael's military pension only covering so much. When she arrived home, she found Ethan at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, with Ranger lying at his feet. "I've been working on a presentation," he announced as she set down her bag, "for why we should keep Ranger." Sarah smiled despite her fatigue. "Let's hear it." Ethan launched into an impressively researched argument, complete with statistics about police dog retirement, costs and benefits of dog ownership, and the positive impact of service animals on mental health. "Where's Lily?" Sarah asked when he finished. "In the living room. She's been reading to Ranger all afternoon." Ethan lowered his voice. "Out loud, Mom. Full books, Mrs. Abernathy nearly cried when she heard her." Sarah moved quietly to the living room doorway. Sure enough, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, a picture book open in her lap, reading with animation to Ranger, who watched her with focused attention. And the prince knew the princess was perfect because the glass slipper fit just right. Lily read, turning the page carefully. Ranger's ears perked up at the sound of Sarah's footsteps, and he turned to acknowledge her with a soft whine of greeting. Lily looked up, her face brightening. "Mom, I'm reading Cinderella to Ranger. It's his first time." "I can see that," Sarah said, kneeling beside them. "He seems to be enjoying it." "He likes stories with happy endings," Lily informed her seriously. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and Michael's old journal. She hadn't read it since his death, finding the reminders too painful, but now she searched its pages for any mention of K-9 training that might help their case. Near the back, a passage caught her eye. "Worked with a promising young GSD pup today. Call name Storm. Incredible focus and drive. If his offspring inherit half his intelligence, they'll be exceptional service dogs. Captain says Storm's being transferred to the police breeding program next month. Hope I get to see what becomes of his line." Sarah stared at the page, a memory surfacing. Michael had shown her a photograph once of himself with a handsome German shepherd during his last deployment. "That's Storm," he'd said proudly. "Best dog in the unit." Could Ranger possibly be connected to Storm? The timing would be about right. Storm would have entered the breeding program around 8 or 9 years ago, as if summoned by her thoughts. Ranger padded into the kitchen and sat beside her chair, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. "Are you part of Storm's line?" she asked softly, reaching out to stroke his head. Ranger leaned into her touch with a sigh that seemed almost human in its emotion. Sarah's phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from an unknown number. "Mrs. Thompson, This is Chief Bennett. Found something interesting in Officer Miller's personnel file. He requested Ranger specifically from the K-9 Training Center because the dog was bred from a military working dog named Storm that he worked with during a joint training exercise. Small world. Let's talk tomorrow about a possible solution. Sarah stared at the message, then at Ranger, a chill running down her spine. Of all the dogs in all the world, how had this particular one found his way to her family? It felt like more than coincidence. It felt like Michael's hand reaching across the divide, guiding them toward healing. "I think we're supposed to help each other," she told Ranger, who tilted his head as if considering her words. "I just hope we get the chance." As if in response, Ranger stood and walked to the living room window. Rising onto his hind legs, he peered out into the darkness, his silhouette stark against the glass. But this time, instead of maintaining his vigil, he dropped back down after a few moments and returned to Sarah's side, pressing against her leg with a soft whine. It seemed, perhaps, that he was ready to stop searching for what was lost and start embracing what could be found. The Riverdale Community Center hummed with tension as residents filed into the wood-paneled meeting room. Sarah hadn't expected such a turnout for what she'd thought would be a simple administrative hearing. But apparently, Ranger's story had spread through town like wildfire. She recognized neighbors, hospital colleagues, and several uniformed police officers among the crowd. Chief Bennett had called that morning to inform her that due to public interest and procedural complexities, the decision regarding Ranger would be addressed at an open town meeting rather than handled internally. Sarah suspected this was either a bureaucratic maneuver to avoid direct responsibility or a genuine attempt at community involvement. Either way, her stomach knotted with anxiety as she guided Lily and Ethan to seats in the front row. Ranger sat perfectly at attention beside Lily, his disciplined posture a stark contrast to the little girl's nervous fidgeting. Though the room buzzed with conversation, the German Shepherd remained focused solely on Lily, occasionally nudging her hand with his nose when her breathing quickened. "It's going to be okay," Sarah whispered, squeezing her daughter's shoulder, wishing she felt as confident as she tried to sound. At precisely 7 o'clock, Mayor Eleanor Wilson called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of her gavel. A formidable woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes. She addressed the room with practiced authority. "We're here to address the matter of K-9 Officer Ranger, formerly partnered with the late Officer James Miller," she announced, nodding toward the Thompson family. As many of you know, Ranger was recently found after 6 months as a stray and is currently in the temporary custody of the Thompson family. The question before us is whether he should be returned to police department custody or if other arrangements might be considered. Chief Bennett, a broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair, stepped forward. "Ordinarily, this would be a straightforward departmental matter," he explained. "However, given the unusual circumstances and significant community interest, we felt a public forum was appropriate." Officer Diane Russell, from Animal Control, was the first to present her case. Her crisp uniform and clipped speech gave her an air of uncompromising efficiency. "While I sympathize with the Thompson family's attachment to this animal," she began, not sounding particularly sympathetic at all, "K-9 Ranger is classified as potentially dangerous following an incident at County General Hospital where he exhibited aggressive behavior toward medical personnel. Additionally, as a specially trained police dog valued at over $30,000, He represents significant public investment. The proper procedure is clear. He should be returned to police custody immediately." A murmur rippled through the audience. Sarah felt Ethan stiffen beside her. "May I ask a question?" Dr. Eleanor Wright raised her hand from the third row. When acknowledged, she stood, her professional demeanor lending weight to her words. "Has anyone investigated the context of this so-called aggressive incident? As a psychologist, I know that behavior cannot be properly evaluated without understanding its triggers and circumstances." Officer Russell's lips thinned. "The report states that following Officer Miller's death, the dog became unmanageable, growling and snapping at hospital staff who attempted to remove him from the room." From the back of the room, a woman in scrubs stood up. Sarah recognized her as Nancy Chen, one of the night nurses from her unit at County General. "I was there that night," Nurse Chen said, her voice quiet but firm. "Officer Miller had been in and out of consciousness. His last coherent words were asking for his dog. When he flatlined, we called a code, and in the chaos, someone brought Ranger in. I think they thought Miller was asking for him in his final moments. When we started CPR, Ranger became distressed. He wasn't attacking anyone. He was trying to get to Miller, probably to protect him. It looked like aggression to people who don't understand police dogs. But to me, it looked like grief." The room fell silent as Nurse Chen sat down. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, imagining Ranger's confusion and distress in that moment. Chief Bennett cleared his throat. "Thank you for that clarification. Nurse Chen, it does provide important context." He turned to address the room more broadly. "There's another factor to consider. We've learned that Ranger has a unique connection to the Thompson family. Officer Miller specifically requested Ranger from the K-9 training program because he was bred from a military working dog named Storm, a dog that Michael Thompson, Sarah's late husband, worked with during his military service." A collective murmur of surprise swept through the room. Sarah felt eyes turning toward her family, some curious, others skeptical. "That seems like quite a coincidence," Mayor Wilson observed, raising an eyebrow. "I don't believe in coincidences of this magnitude." "Mayor," Chief Bennett responded, "I believe it speaks to why Ranger has bonded so quickly with the Thompson children, particularly young Lily." At the mention of her name, Lily pressed closer to Ranger, who remained steadfastly at her side. Dr. Wright rose again. "If I may, I'd like to speak to the therapeutic benefit I've observed. Lily Thompson has suffered from selective mutism following her father's death. In just 3 days with Ranger, she's made more progress than in 6 months of conventional therapy. As her psychologist, I believe separating them now would cause significant psychological harm." Officer Russell wasn't backing down. "While that's unfortunate, it doesn't change the fact that placing a police-trained German Shepherd with a history of aggressive behavior in a household with children poses unacceptable risks." The debate continued, voices rising and falling as various community members offered opinions. Sarah noticed Lily growing increasingly tense beside her, small fingers clutching Ranger's fur as if someone might physically tear him away at any moment. "I'd like to hear from someone else," Chief Bennett said suddenly. interrupting a particularly heated exchange between Officer Russell and a retired K-9 handler who had spoken in favor of Rangers staying with the Thompsons. "Ethan Thompson, would you share your perspective?" Ethan looked startled at being called upon, but stood with remarkable composure for a 12-year-old. "Ranger isn't dangerous," he stated firmly. "He's loyal and protective, which is exactly what he was bred and trained to be. My dad always said that working dogs need a purpose. I think Ranger has found a new purpose with us, protecting Lily, helping her heal. Dad would have said that's just as important as police work." His simple eloquence drew appreciative nods from several attendees. Sarah squeezed his hand when he sat back down, pride momentarily overshadowing her anxiety. "Mrs. Thompson," Mayor Wilson addressed her directly. "You've been quiet. As a nurse and the potential adoptive owner, what's your response to the safety concerns?" Sarah took a deep breath and stood, feeling the weight of the room's attention. "I won't pretend there are no risks. Any dog, especially one with Ranger's training, requires responsible handling. But I grew up around working dogs, and my husband taught me a great deal about their psychology and training. I believe Ranger's behavior at the hospital was a manifestation of grief and protective instinct, not aggression. What I've seen at home is a dog who is gentle with my children, alert to their emotional needs, and desperate for a new purpose." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Officer Miller is gone, but Ranger still has so much to give. He's been searching for months for someone who can't come back. My family knows exactly how that feels. Maybe that's why we found each other. Maybe we're meant to help each other heal." The room had fallen silent, but a soft sob broke the stillness. Sarah turned to see Lily, tears streaming down her face, clutching Ranger's fur. Without warning, the little girl stood. "Please, don't take him away," she said, her voice small but clear in the hushed room. "He needs us, and we need him." It was the first time Lily had spoken in public since Michael's death. Sarah felt her own eyes filling with tears as murmurs of sympathy rippled through the audience. Mayor Wilson appeared moved, but maintained her official demeanor. "Thank you for your courage, young lady. This is clearly a complex situation with valid concerns on both sides. I'd like to hear from one more person before we move to a vote. Is there a Mrs. Miller present?" Officer Miller's sister, a woman in her 40s, stood from the middle row, petite with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "I'm Catherine Miller, James's sister," she confirmed. "I was given custody of Ranger after Jimmy died, but he escaped from my yard repeatedly. He would stand at the end of my driveway for hours, watching for Jimmy's cruiser. When he finally managed to get away completely, I was almost relieved." Her voice broke slightly. "I love animals, but Ranger wasn't just grieving, he was searching, and I couldn't give him what he needed." She turned to look directly at the Thompson family. "But watching him with that little girl, that's the first time I've seen him fully present since Jimmy died. He's not looking over her shoulder for someone else anymore. I think he's found where he belongs." Her testimony created a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere. Even Officer Russell seemed less certain in her opposition. Chief Bennett consulted briefly with the mayor before addressing the gathering again. "I propose a compromise. We officially retire K-9 Officer Ranger from police service with full honors. The Thompson family will be granted provisional custody. contingent upon completion of a family K-9 training course and quarterly behavioral assessments for the first year. Officer Russell will conduct monthly home visits for the first 6 months to ensure proper integration. Officer Russell frowned but nodded her reluctant agreement. "All in favor," Mayor Wilson called. The response was overwhelming, with only a handful of dissenters among the raised hands. "Motion carried," the mayor declared with a sharp rap of her gavel. "K-9 Officer Ranger is officially retired and provisionally placed with the Thompson family." The tension that had been building in Sarah's chest released in a rush. She found herself enveloped in a hug from Ethan while Lily dropped to her knees beside Ranger, whispering into his fur. As the meeting dispersed, community members approached to congratulate them. Chief Bennett worked his way through the crowd to reach them, a small wooden box in his hands. "This belongs to Ranger," he said, opening it to reveal a polished badge and a collection of service medals. "And now, to your family. Officer Miller would be pleased to know his partner found such a good home." Lily reached out tentatively to touch one of the medals. "Can I wear one of these for Ranger? So he remembers he's still a hero?" Chief Bennett smiled. "I think that would be entirely appropriate. In fact," he continued, reaching into his pocket, "I had something made for him." He produced a new tag for Ranger's collar, embossed with both the police department insignia and the words "Retired, Service with Honor." As Catherine Miller helped Lily attach the new tag to Ranger's collar, an elderly woman made her way toward them, moving slowly with the aid of a walker. "Mrs. Thompson?" she inquired, her voice quavering slightly. "I'm Agnes Winters. I live on Maple Street, about 4 blocks from where you found this remarkable dog." Sarah offered her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Winters. I wanted you to know," the older woman continued, "that your Ranger saved my life about 3 months ago. I fell in my front yard while getting the mail, broke my hip, couldn't get up or call for help. This dog appeared out of nowhere, stayed by my side, and barked until my neighbor came to investigate. The doctor said I could have died from exposure if I'd been out there much longer." Sarah stared at her in astonishment. "Ranger did that?" Mrs. Winters nodded, reaching out with a gnarled hand to pat the German shepherd's head. "He didn't just wander your town these past months. He was still serving it, still protecting people, even without his handler. That's not a dangerous animal. That's a hero." As Sarah processed this new information, she watched Lily lean against Ranger, her small face peaceful in a way it hadn't been since before Michael's death. The German shepherd stood attentively at her side, no longer looking past her for a ghost, but fully present in his new role. For the first time in over a year, Sarah felt the knot of grief in her chest begin to loosen. They still had challenges ahead: training courses, assessments, the practical concerns of incorporating a large dog into their home and budget. But in this moment, watching her daughter smile as she showed Ranger's medals to her brother, Sarah knew they'd made the right decision. Some wounds needed more than time to heal. Sometimes they needed a guide, someone who understood the journey because they'd walked it themselves. The first snowfall of December transformed Riverdale into a postcard-perfect scene, with white-capped rooftops and crystalline tree branches glittering under streetlights. 2 months had passed since the town meeting that had officially made Ranger part of the Thompson family, and life had settled into a new rhythm. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as Ethan and Lily built a snowman in the backyard, Ranger circling them attentively, occasionally pouncing on a snowdrift with puppy-like exuberance that belied his 8 years. Their progress as a family had been steady, if not without challenges. The training course required by Chief Bennett had proved more demanding than anticipated, requiring weekend commitments and consistent practice. Ranger had excelled, of course, his prior training making him a model student, but teaching the Thompsons to properly handle a dog of his caliber had involved a steep learning curve. Sarah had worried initially about the cost, but an anonymous donation had covered the training fees, and a local veterinarian had offered discounted services for Ranger after learning his story. The community had embraced them in unexpected ways, something Sarah was still learning to accept after months of isolation in her grief. Lily's progress had been the most remarkable. Dr. Wright had reduced their sessions to bi-weekly as Lily continued to speak more freely, not just with family, but with classmates and teachers as well. Her latest report card showed significant improvement, with a special note from her teacher about her newfound confidence. Ethan, too, seemed lighter somehow. His protective vigilance over his sister had eased, as Ranger assumed some of that responsibility, allowing the boy more freedom to engage with friends and his own interests. He joined the school's robotics club and was talking about trying out for the baseball team in spring. Sarah smiled as she watched her children playing in the snow. For the first time since Michael's death, she could envision a future that wasn't defined solely by loss. The ringing of her cell phone interrupted her reverie. The caller ID showed Catherine Miller's name. "Sarah, it's Kathy Miller. I just wanted to check if we're still on for tomorrow, the 6-month memorial service." Sarah's smile faded. "Yes, of course. We wouldn't miss it." Tomorrow marked 6 months since Officer James Miller had lost his battle with cancer. The police department was holding a memorial service, and as Ranger's new family, the Thompsons had been invited to attend. "Thank you," Catherine said, her voice softening. "It means a lot to have Ranger there. Jimmy would have wanted that." After hanging up, Sarah gazed out at the yard again, a familiar knot of anxiety forming in her chest. They had come so far, but there were still moments when grief ambushed them, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries. Tomorrow would be such a day, not for their family directly, but for Ranger. How would he react to returning to the police station, to being surrounded by Officer Miller's colleagues, to the inevitable reminders of his former handler? The weather forecast predicted the snow would continue overnight, potentially making travel difficult. Sarah made a mental note to lay out their good clothes and allow extra time in the morning. As she turned from the window to start dinner preparations, she noticed the calendar hanging on the refrigerator door. Tomorrow's date was circled in red. She had assumed it was just for Miller's memorial. But there was something else written there in Ethan's careful handwriting. Dad's Foot Locker delivery. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Michael's personal effects from his last deployment had been delayed multiple times due to administrative errors. After more than a year of waiting, the military had finally located and processed his remaining belongings. The timing was either cruelly coincidental or cosmically appropriate. Another goodbye on a day already marked for remembrance. That night, Sarah found sleep elusive. She lay awake, listening to the soft patter of snow against the windows and the occasional creak of the old house settling. Around midnight, she heard the click of nails on hardwood, Ranger making his nightly rounds. The German Shepherd had established a routine of checking each family member before settling down to sleep, a habit that Sarah found both endearing and reassuring. Her bedroom door nudged open, and Ranger's silhouette appeared in the doorway. Normally, he would simply peer in, confirm her presence. and move on to check Ethan's room. Tonight, however, he padded to her bedside and sat, his dark eyes gleaming in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Can't sleep either." "Huh," Sarah murmured, reaching out to stroke his head. Ranger whined softly, then did something unusual. He placed his paw on the edge of her bed, a gesture he typically reserved for alerting them to something requiring attention. "What is it, boy? Everything okay?" In response, Ranger moved to her bedroom door and looked back expectantly. Curious, Sarah slipped out of bed and followed him into the hallway. Instead of leading her to check on the children, as she half expected, Ranger descended the stairs and went to the front door. There. He rose onto his hind legs and peered out the sidelight window, his posture rigid with attention. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter night. It was the first time since joining their family that Ranger had resumed his old habit of searching for his handler. The timing, the night before Miller's memorial, seemed too significant to be coincidence. "He's not out there, Ranger," she said gently, kneeling beside the dog. "I'm sorry." Ranger dropped back to all fours and turned to face her, his expression almost human in its complexity. He whined again, then padded to the living room, where photographs of Michael lined the mantelpiece. He sat before them, looking back at Sarah with what she could only interpret as shared understanding. "I know," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I miss him too." She sat on the floor beside Ranger, drawing comfort from his solid warmth, as she often had these past months. Together, they kept vigil until the sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, snowflakes still swirling beyond the windows. Morning arrived with unexpected intensity. The predicted snowfall had developed into a proper blizzard overnight. Sarah's phone buzzed with a weather alert advising against non-essential travel, followed almost immediately by a text from Catherine Miller. "Memorial postponed due to weather. Chief's orders. Will reschedule when roads clear." The postponement brought mixed feelings: relief at not having to navigate treacherous roads, disappointment at the delayed closure for Ranger, and anxiety about what this might mean for the delivery of Michael's footlocker. That question was answered by her next notification, a message from the delivery service reporting all routes suspended until further notice. "Looks like we're having a snow day," Sarah announced to Ethan and Lily over breakfast. "Both the memorial and Dad's footlocker delivery have been postponed." Ethan nodded, accepting the news with the quiet resilience that sometimes made him seem far older than his 12 years. Lily, however, looked troubled. "But Ranger got all handsome for the memory day," she protested, gesturing to where the German shepherd sat at attention beside her chair, his coat freshly brushed, his retired canine tag polished to a gleam. "And I wanted to show him Daddy's things." Sarah hadn't realized how much Lily had been anticipating these events. "We'll still have the memorial and get Dad's things, honey. Just not today." Lily's lower lip trembled. "But Ranger needs to say goodbye to his police friend. And I want to show him that Daddy was a dog hero, too." The simple logic of her daughter's statement struck Sarah with unexpected force. In their adult preoccupation with logistics and proper ceremonies, had they overlooked the most basic need, the emotional closure that both Lily and Ranger might require before she could formulate a response? A sharp knock at the front door startled them all. Ranger was immediately alert, moving to the hallway with professional focus rather than the barking excitement of a typical house dog. Sarah followed, puzzled by who might be visiting during a blizzard. Through the side-light window, she could make out the hunched figure of an older man in a military uniform, stamping snow from his boots on their porch. "Master Sergeant Wallace." The man introduced himself when she opened the door, his weathered face reddened by cold. "I have a delivery for the Thompson family. Michael Thompson's personal effects." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "But I received a notification that deliveries were suspended." The sergeant's expression softened. "They are, ma'am, for regular services. But I knew Michael, served with him in his first tour. When I saw his name on today's manifest, I couldn't let his things sit in a warehouse for another week. Not when I was able to bring them myself." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she ushered the man inside, overwhelmed by this unexpected act of loyalty. Ethan and Lily appeared in the hallway, with Ranger standing protectively between them and the stranger until Sarah's calm demeanor signaled there was no threat. "You must be Michael's children," Sergeant Wallace said, his voice gentling as he addressed them. "Your father was one of the finest handlers I ever worked with. Those dogs would have followed him anywhere." Lily's eyes widened. "Did you know Storm Ranger's daddy?" The sergeant looked startled, then chuckled. "Storm! Now there was a remarkable animal. How do you know about him?" "Little Miss." "He's in Daddy's journal," Lily explained. "And Ranger is his puppy." "Well, not exactly his puppy," Sarah clarified. "But from his line, yes." Master Sergeant Wallace knelt to Ranger's level, examining him with professional interest. "I can see the resemblance," he said finally. "Same intelligent eyes, same steady temperament." He glanced up at Sarah. "Seems like this dog found his way home, in a manner of speaking." As he rose, groaning slightly at the protest of aging knees, the sergeant gestured toward the front door. "The footlocker's on my truck." "Not regulation procedure, but given the circumstances, would you like me to bring it in now?" Sarah nodded, a strange sense of foreboding mingling with her gratitude. After more than a year of waiting, Michael's final possessions were literally on their doorstep, arriving on the very day that had been meant to mark another farewell. The universe, it seemed, had a peculiar sense of timing. The olive-green footlocker sat in the center of the living room like a monolith, its metal latches gleaming dully in the muted light filtering through snow-covered windows. After helping carry it inside, Master Sergeant Wallace had declined Sarah's invitation to stay. Citing other deliveries he was determined to complete despite the weather. His parting words lingered in the silence he left behind. "Michael would be proud of you all," he'd said, his weathered hand resting briefly on Ethan's shoulder. "Especially of how you've honored his legacy with this dog. It's what he would have wanted." Now the Thompson family gathered around the footlocker, a tangible connection to Michael that had traveled thousands of miles to reach them. Sarah ran her fingers over the stenciled name and service number, hesitating at the latches. "Should we open it now?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. These were Michael's final possessions, items he had touched, used, valued enough to keep with him during his last deployment. Once opened, that seal of time would be broken forever. "Yes," Lily said decisively, kneeling beside the footlocker. "Ranger wants to see what's inside." The German shepherd sat at attention beside Lily, his dark eyes fixed on the container with an intensity that suggested he understood its significance. Perhaps he recognized Michael's scent lingering on the metal and canvas, Sarah thought. Or perhaps he simply sensed the emotional weight the object carried for his new family. With a deep breath, Sarah released the latches and lifted the lid. The familiar smell of Michael, a complex blend of military-issue soap, the mint gum he'd always chewed, and something indefinably him, wafted up, bringing an instant sting of tears to her eyes. Ethan made a small sound beside her, something between a gasp and a sob, quickly suppressed. The contents were neatly organized, as Michael had always been in life uniforms folded with military precision, boots wrapped in protective cloth, a sealed envelope containing official documents, books he'd been reading, a carved wooden box that held the watch Sarah had given him on their 10th anniversary, a small collection of smooth stones Lily had painted for him before his deployment. As Sarah carefully lifted out each item, explaining its significance to the children, she noticed Ranger's attention had fixed on something still in the footlocker. Following his gaze, she saw a battered leather pouch tucked into one corner. "What's that?" Ethan asked, reaching for it. The pouch contained a collection of photographs, dog tags that weren't Michael's, and a folded letter sealed with military tape. The photos showed Michael with various military working dogs, including several of him with a handsome German shepherd that bore a striking resemblance to Ranger. "That must be Storm," Ethan said, examining one photo closely. "Ranger's sire." Lily picked up another photograph, this one showing Michael with a younger man in police uniform, both kneeling beside a German shepherd puppy. "Who's that with Daddy?" she asked, showing it to Sarah. Sarah studied the image, a chill running through her as she recognized the other man. That's Officer Miller," she said, her voice hushed with disbelief. "Ranger's handler." Ethan leaned over to look. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Sarah confirmed, remembering the photos she'd seen in news articles about Officer Miller's service. "But how did your father know him?" As if in answer, the sealed letter slipped from Ethan's fingers, landing open on the floor. The military tape had aged, losing its adhesive strength. Inside was a handwritten note in Michael's familiar scrawl, dated just weeks before his death. "Jim," it began. "Sending these photos of Storm and his latest offspring like I promised. The pup you picked out is shaping up to be exceptional, reminds me of his sire in all the best ways. My deployment's been extended, but I'm still planning to help with his specialized training when I get back. These dogs are a legacy worth preserving, and there's no one I'd rather pass Storm's line to than you. Take care of yourself, and that promising young K9. See you stateside soon. Mike." The letter trembled in Sarah's hands as the connection crystallized. Michael had known James Miller, had helped select Ranger as a puppy, had planned to be involved in his training. Dad was supposed to train Ranger, Ethan said slowly, piecing it together. But then he died in Afghanistan. "And then Officer Miller died too," Lily added, her small face solemn. "So Ranger lost both of them." The revelation settled over the room like the snow blanketing the world outside, softening edges, connecting disparate elements into a unified whole. It wasn't just coincidence that had brought Ranger to them. It was a chain of relationships and shared purpose that had begun years ago with Michael and Storm. Ranger whined softly, pressing closer to Lily as if offering comfort. The little girl wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "It's okay," she whispered. "We found each other now." The moment of revelation was broken by a sharp knock at the door. Sarah rose to answer it, expecting perhaps the return of Sergeant Wallace, but instead found Chief Bennett on her porch, snow dusting his uniform and concern etched on his face. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, foregoing pleasantries. "Is Lily home? Is she all right?" The question sent a spike of alarm through Sarah. "Yes. She's in the living room. What's wrong?" Relief washed over the chief's features. "Thank God. We've been trying to reach you. Your cell service must be down with the storm." He stomped snow from his boots before stepping inside. "Lily was reported missing from your house about an hour ago. A neighbor saw her leaving alone during the worst of the blizzard." "That's impossible," Sarah protested, leading him to the living room where Lily sat on the floor beside Ranger, still examining the photographs. "She's been here the whole time. We've been going through my husband's footlocker." Chief Bennett frowned, clearly confused. "Mrs. Abernathy was quite certain she saw Lily leaving your backyard, heading toward the old ravine path. Said she tried to call out to her, but the wind was too strong." Ethan's head snapped up. "Mrs. Abernathy has cataracts. She's always mixing up Lily with the Sullivan girl from 2 streets over. They both have red hair." A new worry took root in Sarah's chest. If it wasn't Lily, then some child is out there in this storm. "I've already dispatched search teams," Chief Bennett assured her, pulling out his radio to update his officers on the misidentification. "But visibility is near zero, and the ravine area is treacherous in this weather." Ranger had risen to his feet, suddenly alert, ears pricked forward at the mention of the ravine. He moved to the front door and looked back at them expectantly, the same behavior he'd exhibited during his nighttime check of the house. "He wants to help search," Ethan said, already reaching for his snow boots. "He's trained for this kind of thing, right?" Chief Bennett hesitated. "He's been retired." "But he hasn't forgotten his training," Sarah interjected. "You've seen him at the sessions. He's still got all his skills." The chief considered this for a moment, then nodded briskly. "We could use a good tracking dog, but I can't authorize a civilian to join an active search, especially in these conditions." "Then deputize him temporarily," Sarah suggested. "You have that authority, don't you?" Outside, the wind howled with increasing ferocity, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. Chief Bennett made his decision with a sharp nod. "Ranger's skills could make the difference out there. I'll take him with me. But the rest of you stay here where it's safe." Ethan was already clipping Ranger's lead to his collar. "He'll need a scent article from the Sullivan girl." "We'll stop by their house on the way," Chief Bennett agreed. "Mrs. Thompson, I'll need to borrow some of your husband's cold weather gear if you have it." As Sarah hurried to gather what the chief would need, Lily knelt beside Ranger, her small hands framing his face. "You're going to find that little girl," she told him with absolute conviction, "because that's what heroes do." The simplicity and certainty of her statement lingered in the air long after Chief Bennett had departed with Ranger, disappearing into the swirling white landscape beyond their front porch. The next 3 hours were among the longest of Sarah's life. The power flickered intermittently as the storm intensified. Cell service remained spotty at best. and the emergency radio Chief Bennett had left with them crackled with fragments of communication between search teams battling whiteout conditions. No visual, temperature dropping, need to call it off soon. Can't locate the ravine edge in this visibility. K9 unit still tracking, but each broken transmission ratcheted Sarah's anxiety higher. She kept the children occupied with hot chocolate and board games, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. Ethan, perceptive as always, wasn't fooled, but played along for Lily's sake. As darkness fell, the storm's fury began to wane, winds decreasing from howling gale to persistent moan. The radio communications became clearer, but the news was increasingly grim. The search teams were running out of time and options. The temperature was plummeting with nightfall, and hypothermia was a real threat to both the missing child and the searchers themselves. All units, be advised. A dispatcher's voice came through with sudden clarity. Chief Bennett orders search suspended until daybreak due to dangerous conditions. All personnel return to command post for head count and reassignment. Sarah's heart sank. She glanced at Ethan, who had heard the transmission and now wore an expression of helpless frustration that mirrored her own. The radio crackled again. "Control! This is Bennett. K9 unit refuses to disengage. Rangers picked up something near the east edge of the ravine. We're continuing for now. Send medical team to our GPS coordinates. Over." Hope flared in Sarah's chest. Ranger was still searching, still working, despite the order to stand down. "That's our dog," Ethan said, pride evident in his voice. "He's the best finding dog in the world," Lily agreed with absolute confidence, though she couldn't have heard the radio from where she was coloring at the kitchen table. The next 20 minutes passed in excruciating slowness, the radio falling silent except for terse status requests from the command post, met with equally brief responses from Chief Bennett. Then, finally, "Control. This is Bennett. We've got her. Repeat. We found Emma Sullivan. Ranger located her in a hollow under a fallen tree. She's cold but conscious. Medical team is assessing now. This dog just saved her life." The rush of relief was so intense that Sarah had to sit down, her legs suddenly unsteady beneath her. She didn't realize she was crying until Lily appeared at her side, small fingers wiping tears from her cheeks. "Don't cry, Mommy," Lily said softly. "Ranger did his job. He's bringing the lost girl home." 2 hours later, as Sarah was preparing to put the children to bed despite their protests that they wanted to wait up for Ranger's return, headlights swept across their front windows. Ethan was at the door before Sarah could move, throwing it open to reveal Chief Bennett on their porch, Ranger at his side. The German shepherd looked exhausted but dignified, snow matted in his fur, a makeshift emergency blanket still draped across his back. At the sight of Lily, his tail gave a single weary wag. "Your dog," Chief Bennett said without preamble, "is extraordinary. Emma Sullivan would have died out there without him. He found a scent no human could have detected in those conditions, and refused to give up until we reached her." Ranger crossed the threshold and went directly to Lily, gently touching his nose to her hand as if reporting that his mission was complete. The little girl threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. "I knew you'd find her." As Sarah invited the chief in for coffee and to warm up before heading back to the command post, she noticed something remarkable. For the first time since joining their family, Ranger wasn't periodically glancing at the window or door. He wasn't searching anymore. Instead, his attention remained fixed on Lily, on Ethan, on the home and family that had somehow become his own. In the midst of a day marked for remembrance and goodbye, Ranger had found a new beginning, not by forgetting his past, but by honoring it with continued service and love. Spring arrived in Riverdale with an explosion of color and renewal. Cherry blossoms lined the streets. Daffodils pushed through the last patches of snow in the parks, and the memorial garden outside the police station bloomed with fresh plantings around the newly installed bronze statue of a German shepherd standing at attention. The plaque beneath it read, "In honor of K-9 officers who serve beyond the call of duty, dedicated to the memory of Officer James Miller and K-9 Rangers' distinguished service to Riverdale." Although Ranger was very much alive, lounging in a patch of sunlight on the Thompsons' back porch, the police department had decided to honor his service with a memorial. Chief Bennett had explained that it was as much for the community as for Ranger, a reminder of the winter miracle that had captured hearts across town and beyond. Emma Sullivan's rescue had made national news. The image of Ranger leading searchers through a blizzard to find the child, who had been missing for nearly 4 hours in sub-freezing temperatures, had resonated deeply with people. Letters and small gifts for Ranger had poured in from across the country. A children's book author had even contacted Sarah about writing Emma's story. The publicity had brought unexpected blessings. An anonymous donor had established a trust fund for both Thompson Children's College education. A local contractor had offered to renovate their aging kitchen at cost. Most significantly, Sarah had been offered a promotion at the hospital, heading up a new program that brought therapy dogs to pediatric patients, a position that came with better hours and a substantial raise. Life had taken on a rhythm that, if not exactly normal, was at least stable. Ranger had become the solid center around which the family revolved. His morning routine was as precise as a military drill, waking the children for school, accompanying Sarah on her morning run, then settling into his favorite spot by the living room window to watch over the neighborhood. He no longer stood on his hind legs to peer into passing police cars. That searching behavior had faded gradually after Emma's rescue, as if saving the little girl had given him the closure he needed. Today was a special occasion, the 1-year anniversary of Michael's death. Sarah had taken the day off work, and the children were excused from school. They had planned a private remembrance at home, followed by a visit to Michael's grave with flowers Lily had helped select. "Do you think Daddy can see us?" Lily asked as she carefully arranged tulips in a vase at the breakfast table. At 8 years old, she had fully emerged from the shell of silence that had enveloped her after Michael's death. Her therapist had called her recovery remarkable, though Sarah knew there were still difficult days. "I believe he watches over us," Sarah answered, the pain of loss now tempered by a year of healing. "And I think he'd be very proud of how brave you've been." Ethan, entering his teenage years with a recent growth spurt that had him nearly eye level with Sarah, set plates on the table with unusual care. "Dad would definitely approve of Ranger," he said with certainty, "especially after we found out he helped choose him as a puppy." The discovery of Michael's connection to Ranger through James Miller had been both painful and comforting, another goodbye that never happened, but also evidence of how lives could remain connected even after death. Ranger, sensing the emotional undercurrent of the day, moved between family members, offering his steady presence as needed. When Lily's eyes welled with tears while looking at photographs of her father, Ranger was there, his head resting on her lap. When Ethan retreated to his room for a moment of privacy, Ranger followed, lying quietly by the door until invited in. After breakfast, they gathered in the living room where Michael's medals and dog tags were displayed alongside photographs. Sarah had added a new item to the memorial, a framed copy of the letter they'd found in his footlocker, the one that connected Michael to Officer Miller and Ranger. It served as tangible proof of the invisible threads that had brought them together. "I'd like us each to share a memory of Dad," Sarah suggested, sitting on the couch with Lily beside her and Ethan in the armchair that had been Michael's favorite. "Something that makes you smile when you think of him." Lily went first, describing how Michael had taught her to skip stones on the lake during their last family vacation. Ethan recalled fishing trips and the patience his father had shown when teaching him to bait a hook. Sarah shared the story of their first date, when Michael had been so nervous he'd put his jacket on inside out. The simple ritual brought laughter and tears in equal measure, a bittersweet celebration of a life well lived though cut too short. Throughout it all, Ranger remained attentive, his dark eyes moving between family members as if absorbing their stories. When they had finished sharing memories, Sarah noticed Ranger stand and move to Michael's footlocker, which now served as a coffee table in their living room. The German Shepherd pawed gently at the lid, then looked back at the family. "I think he wants us to open it," Ethan said. Sarah nodded, recognizing the behavior. Ranger had been trained to alert to specific scents and objects. It was what had made him such an effective police dog, and how he had found Emma Sullivan despite impossible conditions. Together, they opened the footlocker. Most of Michael's personal effects had been distributed around the house or stored away, but some items remained inside things too precious or painful to display, yet too important to hide completely. Ranger's nose led him unerringly to a small object wrapped in a bandana that Sarah didn't recognize. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a carved wooden dog whistle on a leather cord. "That wasn't there before," she said, confused. Ethan examined it closely. "It must have been hidden in a pocket or something. Look, there's an inscription." Burned into the wood in tiny, precise letters were the words, "To Storm's Line, faithful beyond duty." "It's a special whistle for military dogs," Ethan explained, his research into his father's work evident in his confidence. "They're trained to respond to specific frequencies that ordinary people can't hear." Lily took the whistle reverently. "Can Ranger hear it?" "Probably," Ethan said. "He's from Storm's Line, like the inscription says." Sarah watched as Lily held the whistle to her lips and blew gently. Ranger's ears pricked forward instantly, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert. The response confirmed Ethan's theory. The whistle produced a sound within Ranger's hearing range, but outside human perception. "It's like a message from Daddy," Lily said, her eyes wide with wonder. "He left this for Ranger. But Ranger found us instead." The simple truth of her daughter's observation brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. "Yes," she agreed softly. "I think that's exactly what happened." After their home memorial, they visited Michael's grave at Riverdale Cemetery. It was a peaceful place, with ancient oaks providing dappled shade and a view of the lake in the distance. Ranger walked beside Lily, maintaining perfect heel position without any command, his behavior impeccable as they navigated between headstones. At Michael's grave, they placed the flowers Lily had arranged and stood in quiet remembrance. Sarah noticed that several other graves nearby had fresh flowers as well, including one she recognized from news photographs as Officer James Miller's final resting place. "Can we visit Officer Miller too?" Lily asked, following her mother's gaze. "Ranger might want to say hello." The simple request touched Sarah deeply. "Of course. Honey." They moved to Miller's grave, where Ranger sat without prompting, his dignified posture reminiscent of the bronze statue at the police station. Catherine Miller had left a bouquet of blue forget-me-nots and a small police badge pinned to a ribbon. "Hello, Officer Miller," Lily said, addressing the headstone directly. "Thank you for taking care of Ranger when my daddy couldn't. We're taking good care of him now, and he saved a little girl in the snow. He's still a hero." The guileless tribute brought a lump to Sarah's throat. She placed a hand on Ranger's head, feeling the strong connection between past and present, between what was lost and what remained. As they walked back to the car, Lily skipping ahead with renewed energy, Ethan fell into step beside Sarah. "Do you think it's weird?" he asked in a low voice. "How everything connected Dad knew Officer Miller, who was Ranger's handler, and then Ranger found us. It's like there was a plan." Sarah considered her son's question. A year ago, she might have dismissed such thoughts as wishful thinking. But now, having witnessed the remarkable chain of events that had brought Ranger into their lives, she wasn't so sure. "I think," she said carefully, "that love leaves traces in the world, and sometimes those traces create paths for others to follow." Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. Ahead of them, Lily had stopped to wait, her small hand resting on Ranger's back. The German shepherd stood tall beside her, no longer searching the horizon for someone who couldn't return, but fully present in his new role as protector and companion. As Sarah watched them, her daughter finding her voice again, her son growing into a thoughtful young man, and the remarkable dog who had helped heal them all, she felt Michael's presence more strongly than she had in months, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a continuing influence on the shape of their lives. The path forward would never be without challenges. There would be difficult anniversaries, teenage rebellions, financial worries, and all the ordinary troubles of family life. But they would face them together, strengthened by what they had already overcome and guided by the invisible connections that bound them to each other and to those they had lost. As if sensing her thoughts, Ranger turned to look back at her, his intelligent eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that transcended words. In that moment, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that they had all found exactly where they belonged. From the moment we first saw that German shepherd standing on his hind legs at the intersection, peering into passing police cars with unwavering hope, we recognized a truth many of us understand all too well: the search for something lost that can never be found. After a lifetime of building careers, raising families, and weathering storms both literal and figurative, we know what it means to continue searching, even when logic tells us to stop. Ranger's journey reminds us that grief doesn't follow a timetable, that loyalty transcends understanding, and that sometimes the most profound healing comes from unexpected connections. When Michael's footlocker arrived on that snowy day, revealing the threads that had invisibly connected these lives all along, we're reminded of how our own legacies continue beyond our understanding. The quiet heroism of standing guard, of rising each morning to protect those we love, of finding new purpose when old dreams fade, these are the truths we've lived. Like Ranger, many of us have learned that the most courageous act isn't the dramatic rescue in a blizzard, but the daily decision to stop searching the horizon for what's gone and instead cherish what remains before us.